Welcome to the Grazing Along series, a Forage Nexus initiative to celebrate the National Forage Week. I am Marcelo Valao, Forage Extension Specialist at the University of Florida.
I'm Lilian Silva, I'm the Forage Specialist for Clemson University.
And I'm Bruno Pedreira, the Forage Specialist with the University of Tennessee.
The National Forage Week is an effort from the American Forage and Grassland Council to raise awareness to the importance and impact of forages. And to help us celebrate this important ecosystem, we brought together a distinguished group of colleagues to share the different perspectives on the big picture of forage production systems, and to discuss how the forages and grazing will be an integral part of the future of sustainable agriculture. Today, our guest comes from all the way from New Zealand. Dr. Pablo Gregorini is a professor of livestock production and agricultural systems at Lincoln University, as well as the director for the Lincoln University Pastoral Livestock Production Lab and the head of the Lincoln University Center for Excellence in Designing Future Productive Landscapes. Pablo, I was always fascinated by your concepts of scapes, from thoughtscapes into landscapes. You gave a fantastic presentation in Brazil not too long ago that was very, very interesting, and I want to bring some of those concepts in the conversation. So, to get started, what inspired you to focus on grazing systems and the redesign of those systems for future landscapes?
First of all, thank you for the invite. It's a pleasure to be just dialoguing with you guys, and I feel flattered to be invited to this special week. Two things. One thing is change. As we know, it's the only constant in life is change. And, systems are changing, and we need to embrace the change. We need to embrace complexity rather than simplicity. I keep seeing that we are trying to get more simple and simple. And even from a system point of view and a grazing management point of view, well, there are multiplicities of demands from the society, from the cow, from the soil, from the plants. So that started to brew in my mind a while ago, especially keeping the dialogues with my mentor, like Fred Provenza, Hans Hire, and Stacy Ganter, and how we can start looking at the systems from a completely different point of view, acknowledging that simplicity doesn't do the trick anymore, that McMicken is dead, and it's been dead for a long time. And so those systems do not work anymore. Whether we like it in New Zealand or not, that's an old story. And so we need to get over that and embrace complexity. Simplicity doesn't do the trick. Nobody fixes a computer with a hammer anymore. So in all of that, and just matching not only our personal desires of change things, but the health of the systems, the nourishment of the landscape to the people and beings that live there. We started to brew some sort of thinking with three guys. The three guys. Of course, one was me, the other one was Fred Provenza, and then the last but not least, Ian Gordon, two very good friends and mentors. So we started thinking, okay, how we can propose a change, but really from the big picture, and then nail it down to any particular tactics, right? So we started to think of landscapes, right? But then, so that's not enough. So in the act of thinking, we find ourselves in our thoughtscapes, right? That geography of mind where we locate ourselves as a part of it rather than an observer. And then we started to think, well, if this is my thoughtscape, what is your Lilian's thoughtscape? What is your Marcelo thoughtscape and Bruno thoughtscape? And that literally, when we all live in our geography of mind, inevitably we create that social scape, that cluster of thoughts or thinking that lead us to think of what are the changes that we want to see, feel, and taste in our landscapes, right? And when you think that, immediately takes you to a landscape. It is also a foodscape where we locate the ruminants, right, to graze. And not only ruminants get nourishment from the land and that scape, but we feed of them, and we feed lately the landscape by feeding worms, if you like, right? So there's when we transcend from our thoughtscape, socialscape to landscapes and those foodscapes, right? And in the act of eating, right, in the act of consuming, we say that we consume ourselves. By consumption, we affect who we are, right? Because we are part of the land, and who we are and the land determine, our health. And that's where you transcend, or you move from that thought land foodscape to healthscapes, right? Which embrace the whole thing together. And we are trying to do that by design. So how we can modulate our thoughtscape and influence our socialscape to have a different views and utilization of the landscape, considering that landscape in where we all inhabit, it also feed us and provide medicines for our health. And there's where we say, when we recall the definition of WHO, which is of health, which is not the only the absence of sickness or whatever, but also the presence of things that guarantee or try to enhance the complete mental and physical well-being of all the beings that inhabit that landscape. That's where that view of what we call the multiscapes is what led us to start thinking of grazing and utilization of ruminants in a different way to enhance the land and the landscape that we all inhabit by the strategic spatiotemporal design of foodscapes for health of the environment and us. So hopefully I answered your question there, but that's where they came from. And maybe really big, but yeah, we do some small things anyways.
Absolutely. We're all here taking notes. I saw Bruno was taking some notes as well. So, Pablo, just sort of on the same line that you're talking about, how do you, like, what is the role and how do you see the involvement of farmers in local communities in this process of redesigning landscapes and grazing systems?
Yeah, well, it's key. That's what we co-design. We co-design, even if you like, we co-design a bite with a cow. We co-design a grazing system with the farmer. We co-design a cluster of farms embedded in a landscape with the communities that are physically involved and the communities that are mentally involved there, consumers. For example, the particular case is New Zealand. 95 something percent of our agricultural produce is exported. So there are people that, by the act of consuming a product of New Zealand, literally are buying the picture. They transport themselves to this landscape. They want a bite of that, if you like. So we definitely consider the different part of the communities there. And lately we've been considering and quite strongly how we are engaging with indigenous people, the people of the land. Here, New Zealand, in Mongolia, and Inner Mongolia, in Saudi Arabia, even in Brazil with some people of the Mato Grosso. And lately we have been having those conversations with some people of Utah State as well, how we can consider different communities, not only local communities, but indigenous communities, and translate their knowledge of the land in common practices that can help us to enhance the health as a whole of those grazing lands or grasslands and rangelands.
I'm very glad that we're having this conversation here today, because it's bringing us completely outside of the box here. So I, as a farmer, as a fifth generation of livestock farmers, I cannot go on this conversation today without asking you, how about the economic impact of this, right? Because when we are talking with farmers and we are deciding here that we are going to redesign grazing systems, that when you bring in the social scape and the landscape, we are going much. We are talking much more than my own operation, right? We are talking here about putting communities together. We are talking about the impact of my operation in my neighbor's operation. How can we bring it, Pablo, in the next few years in a way that farmers will say, okay, I'm willing to go through this change that you started in your talk in the first question, right? And what motivates you was the ability, the need to change things. So what's gonna be the motivation to change from a farmer perspective?
That's really good question. And all these things that I'm saying, they sound really good, right? Right, or something, at least to me, right? But it's not easy. There is no change without pain, right? And we brought a couple of articles about that. What are the key or cues for redesign grasslands and grazing systems there, which I can make available through you guys or whatever. So it is not easy. And then again, there is no change without pain. The pain can come in different ways. The pain can be that one that motivates you to change. Cancer, for example, the eutrophication of rivers, the demand of the consumer not buying what you thought was a valuable product, right? So that could be a motivation that, to be exact, that could be the stimuli that motivate your behavior to change. Of course, farmers can perceive that, right? It's like a funnel that just put all together into a farmer to change, or to a cluster of farmers to get together in a discussion group and say, well, look, guys, we've been pressured by the government, we've been pressured by the community, we've been pressured by the clients. What are we gonna do to change? Of course, in different situations of farmers around the world, they are different per se, from a credit point of view, from an economical point of view. And one of the things that we realized that is exposing those demand to farmers, that the farmer most of the time are that busy in their own farming operation. Fair enough. Being a farmer is not easy, and lately is much less easy. So exposing them to what's going on and what is the demand that is coming, and just create that system of stimuli that one way or the other will motivate them to change, with or without pain. There are, of course, farmers that have a better perception of what's coming, and there are farmers that, for any particular reason, don't have the full picture. And it is not a blame to them, because they are farming, and farming is not easy, especially now, and especially with all the aggressions we've been having from a livestock production point of view, or from pastoral systems point of view. So one of the things that we are trying, and through our talks with farmers and meetings with farmers and co-design workshop with farmers, is to expose them through all those scapes at the same time, and just get into what are the primary, secondary, and tertiary needs of all the stakeholders that participate in their farming or landscape where they farm. And once we get into that, once we see the full picture, we say, okay, well, what are the things that we have on hand that can help the farmer to address some of those things in a very democratically way, not to please one only need, but to please all the stakeholders that at the end of the day determine the farm operation, of how that farm operation should function at a bigger scale.
So moving, you mentioned a little bit of policy, Pablo, and there is incentive policies and there is punishing policies. A lot of our environmental policies or drivers of change are normally coming from the negative side. You cannot do this, otherwise there is consequence. And many times when we want to change a mindset for a positive big change that is redesigning that landscape, we'll need a different type of policy that can get people to see the benefit of change and then change rather than be punished for not changing. How do you see the role of public policy in that redesigning of landscape?
Yeah, well, the public policy, it's key, and like you will say, Marcelo, it could be a punishment or could be a stimuli to motivate the farmers to do something. Most of the stimuli could be in terms of cut taxes, increasing price or the product, or you name it. I'm not a politician and I don't want to be a politician. And I imagine, we all have to deal with politicians, right? So that could be a way of interacting with them. Some of the things that we've done in our designs is just talking to them. So look, this is what we are thinking. These are the demands. What are your demands? You're a stakeholder. What is the thing that you need or would like to see done? But not only in the short term, but in the long term. Although, the cycles of politicians goes, to constantly change. And what today is gray, tomorrow could be white, and after that could be black, and then yellow. It's a constant change. And I think that's it's complexity by itself, right? And complexity doesn't necessarily mean complicated if we are keen to embrace that complexity there. One of the things to motivate the farmers and to motivate the politician is to see or to show them that from a buy to a landscape design, a practice by design rather than default, it's quite energetics. And so 1+1 is 3 or even 4, rather than just have that parsimonious approach to solve or okay, we solve this and we are comfortable with this parsimonious approach and that's it. It's just create a multiplicity of trajectories in front of them that enable them and the farmers to make their own decisions where to go, because by design they know that they could tick a lot of the boxes that the multiple demands or politics demand of them. By design, we are used to, if you like, I always give an example, right? We go and sit in a classroom or in your office. Most of the time we were given a chair, right? And that chair, it was designed, not the ones that you are sitting on because they are quite fancy, or I say way more fancy than mine. But those chairs were designed for you to be comfortable for 1 hour or something like that, right? All ergonomically and all of that. But after that time, you started to move, and then you need to leave your desk and all of that, right? Well, I think if we take the design approach and say, well, can we design farm and farming practices in a particular landscape and even thought context, we can get us ourselves sitting in that chair for longer, if you know what I mean.
Just before we move forward to wrap up, I'm really interested to get some of your thoughts, Pablo, on, and you can choose like how you're gonna go with this question. But I was thinking more like, what would be your approach to try to communicate and even to some extent educate not only farmers but also the next generation? Like, how do we engage them on how do we explain for them to understand, and how do we engage them on these changes and on everything that we're talking here today? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a very good question. And what we do is just expose them. We say, well, teach both theories and let the kids decide. present all the evidence that you've got, the good and the bad. And that could be enough stimuli to motivate for a change, whether it is a budgetary thing, whether it is an environmental issue or, human health issue. Expose them to the reality that sometimes is masked by the present of making more money, and just have that middle long-term view, that being able to depart from our immediate needs to more like middle long-term collective needs. Farm not only for ourselves but farm from our kids. I know it's a really big picture of what I'm saying, but we use several methodologies to engage different stakeholders in the landscape of farmscapes, if you like, to travel with us in this change, if you like. Where it could be meeting with farmers and say, well, did you know that if you do this, not only you can solve that, but it has an effect that goes beyond your farm. And if it is yes, I say, well, how we can enhance that, right? Because so you get the farmer engaged. But if they say no, in general, it can be a surprise. Well, or said, oh, I'm not the bad, or I've been good. But just literally establishing that dialogue, and establish the dialogue from the very beginning. Nobody can teach new tricks to an old dog, right? But we can modulate what an old dog can do, right? So, okay, well, we don't mean to change your whole operation now. You're about to retire. The average age of farmers in the developed world is just over 55. So, well, how what you do can help to motivate your future generation, or keep your son farming or your grandson back into the farming community.
Nice. Pablo, great food for thought here. A lot to think about, how to redesign those landscapes. And today we close our Grazing Along series with this fantastic conversation here about how to put all this knowledge of forages and grasslands and how important they are in how we can think about a future of more sustainable future for agriculture using this redesigned concept of grazing and diversity and integration of all of those components. Thanks a lot for participating, and I'm looking forward for another conversation with you at some point.
Now, thank you all for the invite, and feel free to contact me or just pass my details to anybody that would like to have a chat with me.
Fantastic. And we'll have some more materials about your work on the description of this podcast. Thanks a lot.
This podcast was produced by the University of Florida IFAS Forage team and the Cowles Center for Online Learning and Technology.